Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Pow, and today I'm doing week 46 of my 2020 reads. This week I finished 3 books, all of which counted either for Nonfiction November or the IndigAthon, which makes me so pleased. The first book that I finished was We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I buddy read this with Reija at the book Finch, who I will link below. And I think that this is a really good book to buddy read because there's a lot to discuss in this. This is a collection of 8 essays that Coates wrote in The Atlantic that really talk about US politics and race, especially sort of looking at many different topics within the way that Black people are treated in the US. Things like respectability politics, things like mass incarceration, things as well, including Trump's election in 2016. The title of this, We Were 8 Years in Power, is sort of relating what was happening with the Obama administration to the 8 years of kind of power and position in political office that a lot of Black Americans had right after the Civil War, during that Reconstruction era, and then that ended in post-Reconstruction where a lot of things like Jim Crow laws were enacted. So I think that this collection does such a great job of talking about all of these different facets of racism in the US. I really liked a lot of the discussions, and I think that many of these essays were good overviews. I did find though that because I have been reading more books about racism in the US, especially ones that just delve more deeply into specific topics, many of these essays I'd already read books that explore that idea in more depth. And so some of it was kind of a little bit more of a surface level exploration or just stuff I had already been familiar with. So I feel like if you're newer to the topic, this could be a really, really great essay collection. But if you're a little bit more well versed in a lot of that, these might not go as deep in detail as you might want. So I definitely enjoyed the writing, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I finished Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia, edited by Anita Heiss. This is a book that I heard about from Ashley at Don't Have a Degree in Reading, who I will link below, and I was so glad that I picked this up. I have never read anything by an Aboriginal author from Australia, and it was so cool to read this collection. So what this is it's a collection of sort of memoir essays by 50 different people in Australia. Some of these people are professional writers, but many of them are not. It covers all sorts of people who are young, people who are old, people who are, visibly darker skinned, people who are white passing, people who grew up knowing a ton and being connected to their Aboriginal community, people who had no connection, didn't find out until later in life that they were Aboriginal. And I really loved the way that all of these essays sort of came together to form an idea of the spectrum of different experiences of growing up Aboriginal in Australia, which is the point of the collection. I think it was done really, really well. There were a lot of things in this that I learned about, things like the stolen generations, basically this sort of policy that Australia had of taking away lighter skinned children from their Aboriginal parents and placing them in homes or in foster or adoptive families to sort of raise them up more like white. And it's just like all of these policies of basically destroying Aboriginal heritage, and also just the kind of racism that was experienced by so many of these authors. So I thought that this collection was really good. The writing is definitely different for each essay because each person is different, but I still got a ton out of this, and I really definitely recommend it if you want to read some perspectives on what it's like to be Aboriginal. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. And lastly, I read Elatsoe by Darcie Little Badger. I buddy read this with Rachel at Kalanadi, who I will link below, and we had such a fun time reading this. I loved this book so much, you guys. I was really, really looking forward to it. It's one of my anticipated releases for 2020, and it just lived up to everything that I had hoped it would be based on what I've read from Darcie Little Badger before and hearing her speak at conventions. It felt like it was a book directed at me. I loved it so much. I actually actually am going to have a standout alone review for this, so that'll be up later this week. But if you're interested, I'm going to link below 2 reviews by Indigenous booktubers, so not Lip and Apache like Darcie Little Badger, but still people who've done some really excellent reviews of this book. So I'm going to link to Brody and the Midnight Librarian. I strongly agree with everything that they have said in their reviews, so check those out if you're interested. But this book is so much fun. Basically, we follow Ellie, short for Elatsoe, who is a Lip and Apache teenager who is asexual, also owned voices for Darcie Little Badger. And she lives in the modern day world, except the modern day world has real magic and magical beings. It's just part of it. So vampires and like scary scarecrow men who come alive in the cornfields, all of that, it's all real. And she has a special skill passed down in her family for raising the ghosts of dead animals. So she has a very special skill, and she has an experience where her cousin passes away, and people think it's an accident, but she knows that it's not an accident. She knows that he was murdered. And so she decides that she's going to go investigate it and bring justice for his death. And it is basically a murder mystery in a fantastical world. It's so much fun. It is a YA, but there's a lot of aspects of it that read like middle grade. It's got this gentleness and sweetness and focus on friendship and family, while also really focusing on Ellie as a teenager, kind of figuring out what she values and what she's gonna do with her life. I really, really loved it. It also addressed a lot of kind of deeper topics of colonialism, environmentalism, and things like that. So I just thoroughly loved it, highly recommend it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so that's everything that I read for this week. If you guys have read any of these books, if you have any thoughts, any comments, any recommendations, anything at all, go ahead and leave me a comment down below.